not proud.
Fantastic. So, welcome to RPS East Midlands, everybody, and a big welcome to David, who's joining us tonight. So, I've known David for quite a few years now. We were both licentiate assessors, along with Vivica and other people. And over the years, I've made many visits to David's home and also his camera club, the Norwich and District Photographic Society. And during that time, I've listened to David talk about all the different approaches he has to photography. And just a couple of weeks ago, David joined me on a workshop after the RPS Visual Arts residential weekend in Norwich, and he brought three different cameras with him. Although I did remind him that he wasn't counting his mobile phone,
Yes, if you can.
which he took most of his photographs on that day, I think. So welcome, David, and we're really looking forward to your talk tonight. Just before we start, I will send you all a link because next month we've got Vivica talking to us, who's online tonight. So we'll send you all a link to that talk as well. But David, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Let's go to share. Right, now what I want.
We'll go to share if I make you a co-host so that you can
That'd
share.
probably be good.
There we go.
Now what I really want, I'm going to stop. Hang on, just tell me what I want. Desktop. I don't want that, do I?
Well, you are starting to screen share. Let me
minimize that. I just want to get my PowerPoint up,
okay.
Which is Fisheyes. That's the one. Can you all see that?
We can. We can.
That was a great start then. Right, so slideshow. Okay. Slideshow. Now this talk's a bit of a hybrid. It's from this first half, really, I suppose, started off as another talk, with another talk. Now let me just get, okay, so a fisheye's view of the world with a pleasing lack of definition. So this is part of a talk I do, which is called It's a Lens Gym, but not as we know it. And so these just look at some of the slightly more exotic creatures I use, shall we say. Come on. And welcome to the Twilight Zone. Right, so I'm going to put a health warning up, as one must nowadays. So you can't say you've not been warned, and I'm not responsible for any problems afterwards. Right, so a little bit of background. That was taken in the photographer's gallery with an f1.2 lens. So that's about as arty as it's going to get, isn't it? So I've been a member of the camera club since 1978, one way or another. I've been 9 clubs in my travels. I'm chairman of Norwich and District at the moment for my sins. I've been was a photograph judge for the EF for over 20 years. Still do a little bit of judging when people ask me nicely. And I've been doing camera club talks since 1985. The early years were interesting because my talks are sort of a semi-technical nature. And I'd used an overhead projector and a slide projector. So the text and the ideas and the diagrams and the pictures were two separate things. PowerPoint made life so much easier. I got my fellowship in 2014 and I did my licenseship and associateship in 2008. And I was a licenseship assessor for the RPS. I stepped down in August, but I've been did it for near enough 8 years. And a strange little thing, I was the first person to teach digital photographic imaging in Norfolk adult education. And I did it for about 12, 13 years. It was good fun. It was very interesting days when we look back and Photoshop with one undo. Then mention it to people now, they'd fall out and quiver. Right, so personal perspective. I like to experiment. Photography is very much about experimentation. I like the effect of the lens. The effect of a lens can be something that you cannot achieve in software. The lenses are so important. Then you get a bit of digital assistance sometimes. It helps to make it work. But at the end, it's the final image that counts. Is it the right mood or the suitable atmosphere? However you create the image is irrelevant in a manner of speaking. It's what you end up with, the final image you've got, which is doing the talking for you. And how you get there is up to you. And, I've done competition stuff on and off. And of course, there's the dreadful PAGB 5 second images. They're up there for 5 seconds, then three judges give it a score and so on. It's all very soulless, isn't it, really? So I've been trying to do images with a little bit more depth and subtlety, in some cases anyway. And, there's more to photography than just impressing briefly. And I know it won't please many judges. Right, so fisheye lenses. Let's start with the thing. Now, there have been people, the photographic accessories that first came into the photography world in terms of not being used for their intended purpose. And probably in the late 60s, people would strut around with huge Nikon fisheye lenses, trying to look all arty. They originally were produced for scientific recording of the sky because they typically offer a diagonal view of about 180 degrees, so we see all the sky in one go. And the thing we've got to remember, there are two types of fisheye lenses. There's the rectilinear ones, and these try and make it look almost like an ordinary photograph. And there are various calculations, optical calculations, to try and get it drawing straight lines most of the time. And different fisheye lenses have different projections. And so a Nikon fisheye lens can look different to a Canon one, for example. And a circular fisheye lens makes a circular image in the frame, which was the original concept of the fisheye lens. And they're very radical. They're very, very obvious. As I say, sometimes it's obvious you've used a fisheye, sometimes it's not. But whatever it is, they do profoundly change the image. And you've got to use them with care. Are you just using the effect, or are you looking at the image? Are you using the lens to enhance the image, like any photographic effect? Now, that is the mother of all fisheyes, and I think that's the coolest lens ever. And that's a top-end Nikon film camera, and people remember top-end Nikon film cameras. They were big beasts. And that is a 1972 6mm f2.8 fisheye. Now, 220-degree field of view is a bit mind-numbing because you're looking behind yourself. It weighed 5.2 kilograms, virtually handmade. They were amazing creatures. And some years ago, one went for sale and went for about 100,000 quid. But you got to admit, it's seriously cool. And that's actually what it was seeing, which sort of is quite ridiculous, really, when you think about it. But the weight of that front element must have been something else. And that's the sort of image it generated. So, first encounter with fisheyiness, we went to Kent in 2011 and visited Dungeness very briefly. And I must admit, I like the sort of otherworldly feel of it. So he said, oh, really good, let's go in winter. Lots of mood and drama. Well, that's okay. So we went in February half term. We were just moved into our house and it was a building site. That's the only word to describe it. We're living in a building site. It's not recommended. But so we'll go down there in February half term. And the travel lodge were doing rooms for about £12 or something stupid like that. So we went down and we stayed at Hastings and we stayed at, what would I done? Come back to me in a minute. We stayed a couple of different places there. So mood and drama. Well, it didn't quite yield that because it was sunny, mild and calm. At one stage, it was 16 degrees. It wasn't in Norfolk when we got back. So I thought, well, I'm going to hire a fisheye lens, something different, because Dungeness has been photographed to death, hasn't it? So I hired a 10 to 70mm fisheye zoom. It's meant for an APS-C camera. And I thought, well, let's try an unconventional viewpoint on it. This wonderful boat used to be in Hastings Harbour, and sadly it went a few years ago. But there's the one thing the fisheye does do. It does tremendous things with skies. I wouldn't fancy sailing that boat apart from in circles, to be honest. and sort of trying to keep its level. So on this boat, wonderful old boat, and that railway line was straight, so you can work on what was going on. But the skies, sort of they were quite good. The only problem with that lens was it did give a few. It generated halos if you pushed it too far. Let's phrase it like that. That boat sadly is now burnt. There's bits of it left. Somebody set fire to it to film it or so on, which is why Dungeness now has got some quite tight restrictions on photography. But that's a long time ago. And similarly with all this stuff, it's gone. But small planet that I've got. But I was trying to go for impact with these images, and it renders texture really well. The sky wasn't quite that dramatic, but it's amazing what you can do with Nick, isn't it, Nick Silver? I'm working on a book on Dungeness at the moment. We've been going there since 2011. We went there 2024 last time, and I feel I've got about five trips. I think I've got to put it together, to remember it what it was. So great fun was had with it. But then again, this is Beachy Head. I thought if you hold a fisheye lens absolutely level, the middle portion of it, as you'll see later on, actually it works fairly well, and you get this incredible wide-angle lens. And the one thing I found fisheyes do, they do absolutely astounding sun stars. Look at it was 16 degrees. It was when people were in shorts. We came back to Norfolk and we didn't wear shorts. Let's phrase it like that. But now, if you want to buy a fisheye, you're not going to spend a fortune. Sigma do a couple of really good autofocus fisheye lenses. There's an 8mm circular and a 15 f2.8 rectangular. I've got that one and it's an absolute bargain. It's a really good lens. It's in Nikon, Canon, etc. fittings, EF fittings. So you've got to, if you're using on a mirrorless camera, you've got to actually get an adapter for it. Samyang make good fisheye lenses. I had the 8mm f3.5 for a while. Wasn't happy with that. But the 8mm f2.8 for mirrorless camera, it was absolutely stunning little lens, as you will see. And Samyang lenses offer 180 degrees, but because the Canon APS-C chip is a little bit smaller than the conventional APS-C chips, 167. And the thing with what I don't know about you, I love wide angles, but are wide angles ever wide enough? Now they were all manual focus lenses with no electrical connection, so your EXIF data was a bit empty. But they worked really well, and focusing wasn't an issue with the Samyang. I found if I focused a tad beyond a meter, stopped it down to f8, it was sharp from about half a meter to infinity, full stop. Now Canon and Nikon for Discovered made an 8 to 15mm fisheye zoom lens, circular at one end, rectangle at the other. Bit large and at a big price. And Canon, of course, being with the RF doing a bit weird, they decided to do something a bit mad with a dual fisheye lens. And I think that's absolutely incredible, especially when you see what it sees like. And then it's put together in software for stereographic VR imaging. I'm not buying that one. Lauer make a 4mm circular fisheye, 215 degrees field of view, not far off the Nikon. When you look at it on a camera, bit different to the Nikon, isn't it? Uh, and I presume it's not going to be a million miles of in quality, to be honest, because the technology's moved on, hasn't it? But I've not got one of those. Look, could be good fun. I've never been convinced with circular fish eyes. Right. Now, if you want something big and heavy and expensive, Sigma will oblige you. They're making an f1.4 of everything, and they launched a 15mm f1.4 fisheye lens. It's a tad big. It's only Sonny and L mounts at the moment. 1.36 kilograms. I presume it's pitched towards astrophotography, going back to the roots of what Fisheyes did. But you can pick up a second-hand Sigma 15mm for less than 300 quid. Now, which is the more sensible one to load your camera back with if you only want to do perhaps occasional fisheye photography? That's where the question lies. So, some images. We're in Paris, and these wonderful cemetery. We were only there a short while. It was 36 degrees. It was so hot. I'd love to go back because this is the big one where Jim Morrison and all the other ones are buried. I loved that orange window. It looked like an evil eye. And the minute you aim a fisheye upwards, if there's clouds, it becomes really quite dramatic. And you can get a bit of vertigo. Now, these are the grandkids. Chloe, in red, is now 19. Ethan is now 16. So, but they certainly did give a different look to people. But church I go to, reasonable stage. They've got some. I found that fisheyes make a really good gig lens, as you will see. Now, there was a big Christian event up at Lincoln. I used to be the official photographer, what, 2013, 2012 to 2023. And I found that fisheye was fantastic. This place was called the Cowshed. It's where the showground where the cows are stored. But at night they put some fantastic lighting on there. This is little Samyang manual focus lens. But if you engineer it so you can get your horizon level, you can get some really dramatic sense of space with it. The meeting, they had a big top in there, which the capacity about 3,500 people, and I used the fisheye for that, and I reckon there's probably about 2,500, 3,000 people in that photograph. And they also got an old Methodist church in Lincoln, and this was a concert by one of their bands. And if you're up on the balcony of the old Methodist church, it can be quite good. And near symmetry, I'm a great fan of symmetry with fisheye lenses. It works really well. The only lack of symmetry is such as those two gentlemen with their arms raised. But in the big top, I said, "Oh, you can do the interiors," because I knew I had the fisheye. And it was a really, really, really hot day. And they raised the sides of the big top so some air could get in. It also caused light to reflect off the grass which surrounded it. And then you had this wonderful, almost aurora look about it. I said, with a fisheye, you can get quite a bit of drama. But, you know, the light coming through the sides were making these amazing patterns. So for this sort of event, if you can handle it carefully, fantastic lens for this. And say I'm focused a tad over a meter, about 1.5 meters or thereabouts, f8, and that's it. Point and shoot. With this, I was actually slightly over the edge of that stage, but it still got all of that in. But tremendous drama. I say just very good starbursts. And you can, again, if you crop it, you can get a really good sense of space. And if you get in the midst of the congregation, they're all getting lively, you can get some really good action shots, really good involvement. You're right on top of people. A great fan of, I like botanic photography as such. We were at an arboretum in Shropshire, and I saw this wonderful tree. I thought the light on there was rather nice with fisheye. I was literally 2 feet from that tree, something like that. But the monos, that's fine. But when you make it monochrome, all of a sudden it's got virtual symmetry about it, but not quite. But the question is, how many leaves are visible in that picture? That's one tree. But, the fisheye can give you this drama. My favourite trees are redwood. And people Stewart and Vivica, have been down to Norwich. There is this wonderful old cemetery called the Rosary Cemetery. Um, the first nonconformist cemetery in England. It was owned from 1830 to about 1920, full of very mature trees and decaying graves. But the trees in the summer, the light through there, and here you can see the Sigma gives a tremendously good starbursts. Looking up's quite intriguing with a fisheye. This wonderful, scary tree. That's something like the Wizard of Oz.
With your starburst, David, because
Yeah,
obviously with something like this lens, you can shoot
yeah.
almost wide open and
Yeah.
get immense depth of field. But what aperture would you stop down to
I
get that
typically
starburst?
work. I typically work with a fisheye about f8. That gives me at f2.8. Your depth of field's not bad, but to get a really decent depth of field with even with a fisheye, if you're focusing about a meter, 2 meters maximum, stop it down to f8. I think I was sitting somewhere about f8 to get that effect. So, whereas normally lenses, if you get that effect of a sun star, you're often down at f22. But fish eyes seem to do this really well, and they're surprisingly flare resistant. I was quite impressed with the Samyang and the Sigma. Norwich Cathedral, they've got some really nice modern windows in there, the lighting and so on. That always reminds me of a bit of Game of Thrones. Then I was taking shots, and I saw this chap coming through this doorway, and I thought, oh, that's got a bit of potential. So that image was taken, and then let's have a bit of fun. I applied a bit of red there and sort of giving a slight scary look, and I call that the unwelcome visitor. But so fish eyes interior wise are brilliant. You can get so much in them. And the minute you look upwards in a cathedral or a church, you can find angles anywhere, the strong leading die. You can see all the leading lines from the corners. You just got to move it around. The only trouble when you look upwards with a fisheye, you can get a bit of vertigo. It really does throw you. But the Samyang, excellent lens, really is good. It's only about 250 quid. Superb little piece of kit. Now, just to give an idea of the quality of this little Samyang. So that image was taken in, they've got a glass house there. But if we go up close, there are no significant artifacts in that image. And similarly there. Tack sharp. If you've got an APS-C mirrorless camera and you want a fisheye, the Samyang 8mm f2.8 is really good. They do a 7.5mm for Olympus for the Micro Four Thirds as well. A great lens. And mono perhaps works better. About the only way you fit Q into the photograph. That's the older fisheye. Down in More London, sadly there wasn't a lovely blue sky, but that's the Batman building. And people say, "Oh, why you got people in it?" Well, it gives a sense of scale. But I want to go back and retake that. I was actually standing about there. In effect, when I took this fisheye lens, it's showing so much. Trouble is, once you reach a certain physical size, then there are issues to avoid. This Tate Modern, I nearly kept that straight, but the escalator in the Tate Modern. When they reopened the Temperate House a couple of years ago, and because the fisheye bends and twists straight lines, the trick is to use those curves to try and bring it in. Sorry, let me just go. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Birmingham Central Library. If you've been to Birmingham, it's an amazing structure. It's three boxes on top of each other, then there's like a cylinder on the top. And there are various viewing lounges. And I didn't realise there's one up there as well. I've never gone to that one. But we will go back. But this was taken with a fisheye. The straight bits don't look straight at all, shall we say. But it's interesting subject, Birmingham Central Library. The outside is interesting, but it's when you go inside, it always reminds me of like the mothership in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They don't seem to be too fussy about taking photographs as long as you're not setting a tripod up and what have you. So I had the fisheye lens, went in. I tried now. The swoopiness and lights in the place was something else. And let's not forget skies, because the fisheye was designed to work with skies, and Chroma, possibly the second coldest place in the world most of the year, this can occasionally be warm and pleasant, and that's a beautiful sky up there. St John's Cathedral in Norwich, the Catholic Cathedral. I'll go back. Catholic Cathedral in Norwich, built in the 1880s, mock Gothic. But I was virtually lying on the ground to take that shot, and I wasn't using a tripod to try and get it so it's level and symmetrical, because I do think symmetry is quite a powerful tool with a fisheye lens. Duxford. This is the American building at Duxford, full of stuff. What's next to us is the B-52 bomber, the big strategic bomber, which is still flying. First went into service in 55, 56. So it's been serviced for 70 years. They're still using some of them. It's a bit like the Spitfire, but still being used to about 2010. But the fisheye sort of, I want to try and get everything here. Now, there's an interesting little story about this aeroplane, because if you look, you'll see there and there are what look like blinds. And they are actually tin foil or aluminium blinds. Now, the idea was you're flying over to Russia, you're going to drop a hydrogen bomb on Minsk or wherever you're going to do, and there's a big bright flash, and it can blind you. So the Americans, being ever so practical, put these blinds on their bombers. So when they were about to drop a hydrogen bomb or something similar, they pull the blinds up so they didn't get any harm from the flash from the bomb, because it could blind you. Now, the RAF, being a bit more prosaic, shall we say, had a different approach. The pilot had one eye patch. The co-pilot had two eye patches. The idea is you'd be flying over Minsk in your Vulcan bomber, and the pilot, co-pilot, put both eye patches on. The pilot would put one on, drop his hydrogen bomb. He might lose eyesight in one eye. Not a problem. He's got another eye. He can take that patch off and drop another hydrogen bomb. Then the co-pilot could drop another two bombs before nobody could see anything anymore. So the Americans, as ever, being really house proud, put blinds in. And what do we do? Eye patches, pretended to be pirates. Now, again, now you can get, with a fisheye, you can actually get perfectly level horizons. The trouble is everything else bends to fit, but it can work quite well. And I said, great advocate of symmetry. This is one of the little huts there. Vivica can remember freezing eating her fish and chips there, can't you, Vivica?
I can indeed. It was
Yeah.
Arctic.
Yes. I said Chroma's the second coldest place on the planet, even in the middle of the summer. It's incredibly cold. But so the fish eyes really quite good architecturally. And this the Dungeness, it looks pretty good. If there's a good sky, It will always do a good sky for you. The only thing that's a bit of a giveaway that this isn't quite done with a straight lens is when did you last know that that rope's bent? But other than that, but getting up really close, great depth and impact you can generate because you've got a huge depth of field. And so these lenses are quite, very sharp. This little Samyang, as I said, is a cracking little lens. Now, so this was the stage at the church to go to, such use a fisheye, and that sort of a viewpoint you've got there. It's the dark church in a sense of they've not got windows. But you see, that's okay. But if you want to get rid of some of the fishiness of it, you crop it. And apart from a bit of distortion at the edges, people aren't necessarily any wiser. They used a fisheye. This was when the blue whale was first set up in Natural History Museum, and the lighting there was wonderful. So I thought, I'll walk down and have a look, and I had a little fisheye with me. And I saw this picture, so I got the camera, laid it on the floor, could turn the screen 180 degrees so I could see what I was doing, and trying to set it up so it's level. It was difficult trying to get it right. But I didn't realise, because my wife Joan was up at the balcony looking down, this huge crowd of people was gathering around me, wondering what the hell was going on. Well, this was going on. I thought, well, the fisheye just fits it. So that's how it was taken. I thought, well, it needs a crop. Those lights have got to go. Change the light balance a little bit. And that's how it ended up. Oh, I'm quite pleased with that. We went in a high-end competition and got 20 out of 20, so it did its job. Now, as I said, fisheye lenses can be used for landscape. This is up at Brancaster Beach in Norfolk. There were beautiful clouds on that evening, holding so the horizon is level. Because there's no buildings, because there's no people, there's nothing to distort. So as a consequence, you've got an image with great depth and great texture. I annoyed the landscape photographers in our club because we have a landscape group, and that I was in their way because I was taking this while they were on their tripods and things with their filters. But if you're careful how you engineer it, a fisheye can make a really brilliant ultra wide landscape. They can do wide angle shots without stitching. This is up at Sandringham. Again, so there's a hidden, you can see the trees are bending a bit. And this was the Rosary Cemetery. This worked because it's taken in infrared. The vegetation goes white. So the mausoleum or tomb and the fencing stand out. If it was done without infrared, the vegetation would have overwhelmed the effects of the fencing. And a bit of fun, I thought let's modify it a little bit. And I put sort of a bit of red in there, for a camera club competition, sort of keeping it in or something like I called it, but judge didn't get it. Can be quite dramatic with trains, especially if you want to go around sharp bends. It's using the shape, it exaggerates, it stretches. So are they easy to use? Well, possibly. Yes, bits appear when you start looking downwards, whether you like it or not. And how the hell you manage with a 220-degree field of view? That was a 167 field of view. I don't know. And if drops of water get on the front of the element, because the depth of field is so massive, they appear tremendously sharp. So you don't try and do it when it's raining, and you also get tripods in it. So fisheyes for landscape, it depends on the projection it offers. So this is an example of how it tries to project things in straight lines. The Samyang lenses have what's called a stereographic projection, so the corners aren't as extreme. That's a little Samyang lens. It's a tiny little beast, but if you've got an APS-C sensor camera and you want to experiment with a fisheye, that is an excellent proposition. So if you hold it up to level and use the middle third of the image where the least distortion occurs, it works really well. And people can defish them, but if you've got say 15mm Sigma lens and you put the 15mm Sigma fisheye profile in Lightroom, strange things happen, I can assure you. So this was taken at Wickham Fen one evening. Again, because we're not doing battle, with people and buildings, it works very well. This tree up at Sandringham in the middle of winter. I love winter trees. And again, I was within a couple of feet of that tree. But I love the sort of scary look about it. This is part of the Roses Cemetery. I've chatted to a few people at the Visual Arts weekend up in Norwich and saying it's an amazing place, full of graves, wonderfully mature trees. It's on a hill. And it's stepped, and so it's quite an interesting place. But fisheye lens, chroma pin again, trying to keep it level. And again, the clouds are vaguely interesting, but when you actually put it into something like Nick and start experimenting a little bit, the clouds become absolutely dramatic. And of course, the other option is let's get the clouds in and let's forget about the horizon. So it's cliche lens, or is it? The lenses have strong effects, like some of the old Photoshop filters. So it is a shock weapon. You've really got to think about what you're doing with it. So if you've got to use it with purpose and be disciplined, you've got to think, okay, I want it to get this out of this fisheye lens. Symmetrical images, as you can see, can be really powerful. I'm quite a lot into symmetry in my compositions at the moment. It isn't necessarily boring. It depends how you use it. And now the trick is symmetry or total asymmetry. Anything else makes you look, it's sort of distorted, but not quite. It looks like converging verticals. It's a bit sort of careless. So if you're going to go for symmetry, go for symmetry. Go for asymmetry if you're going to do that. Don't bother with anything in between because it doesn't always work. But you can get landscapes with great image width and depth. Urban images work well. And the Samyang and Sigma lenses are really good value for money. You can get these screw-on converters. Don't. That's my simple advice. Don't. They're awful. So it's a Marmite lens, I think we could clearly say. They suit the brave. I love wide angles, so I like my fish eyes. So if you're looking for some sensible money, the Samyang and Sigma lenses, second hand are an excellent bargain. Now, this phrase comes from people of a certain age will remember camera club judges. They'd be photographing a picture of a lady of a certain age where an appropriate soft focus filter was applied. And they have this wonderful line, I can remember hear it now. Oh, this image has got a pleasing lack of definition, which sadly this day and age isn't applicable because most things are so over-processed and aggressive and harsh. It's sort of, we've lost something. But I'm looking at digital pinhole photography here. I've got any glass. Well, and that's the basic thing. I think a lot of people at school have made a pinhole camera.
Hey, David, can I interrupt just for a moment?
Yeah.
Questions. I don't know if you want to do questions as we go through each session.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, by all means.
If anybody's got any questions about fisheye lenses, would this be a good moment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll go back a bit.
Yeah. So having said that, has anybody got any questions about fisheye? Would you like to unmute and ask David your question?
Otherwise, you can ask at the interval.
Yeah.
I mean, you see either way.
No, I think it sounds like you've answered everybody's questions,
Yeah,
David. So
good.
we'll carry on. Thank you.
No problem. Right. So pinhole, very simple. Jones. The camera obscura was a derivative of it. I was watching a thing about Canaletto's paintings of Venice a little while ago, and they're just saying how there's no disputing that he had to use a camera obscura to be able to see and get the outlines of the buildings accurately. So pinhole cameras were there at the start. Euclid in 300 BC, and the image is like anything else. Those are words which can describe them. Now, sadly, so when I do the talk, I usually have quite a few pinhole prints. They look far, far better on paper than they do on a screen. Simple as that. They acquire a certain extra magic quality when they're printed on a nice paper and seen in the flesh, shall we say. But it's there. But I love these things. So we go back to, let's start at the age of pictorialism. In the 1880s, the Impressionist movement started to influence some of the more daring art photographers. So it created antagonism. On one side were the old school. And we can always think of people in camera clubs and other things who have got the sharpest, the biggest, and the best. And on the other side were these people who liked the term, I love the word fuzziness. It's literally the opposite of sharpness, isn't it? And these people came in and they came as styles pictorialism. Now, funny enough, at Norwich, we've got a number of special interest groups within the club. And a group of us got together and we formed the pictorialist group. And it originally started with the working name, the Wobbly Lens Society. And we used lenses, processes, analog, all sorts of things to try and get an alternative to today's excesses, shall we say. And one of the biggest proponents was George Davidson. Now, he won an award at the annual exhibition for the Photographic Society of London. And that's the image. And it was taken with a pinhole. So Davidson received the praise, but the use of the pinhole got this criticism. And I like this. I think that's such a good sort of, yeah, so what? It created a great picture. And, this is where the schism in photography, because some people are absolute perfection and sharpness and so on. And I think somewhere along the line, we might have lost a bit. I don't know. So the award, the criticism, a number of people left the Royal Photographic Society. They founded the foundation of the Linked Ring. And Davidson, one of the original founders of it. And now it's called the London Salon, where they still encourage the art of photography. So you can make a film-based pinhole camera or get a camera body cap converted and using a digital camera. Lots of ways of doing it. Basically, the smaller pinhole, the sharper the image. But the smaller the pinhole, the smaller the aperture. Now, most pinholes tend to be about 0.03 of a millimetre, which on a full-frame camera gives you, on APS-C camera as well, gives you an aperture about f150 to f180. Exposures can be long, but using a high ISO setting, actually handheld is possible. I've done most of the images you're going to see for here on this talk are taken with handheld pictures, handheld shots. The very small aperture will exaggerate the appearance of any dust on your sensor. I can assure you, if you do this, you will be cloning, because even at f22, dust spots start emerging on a view if you've got dust on your sensor. But the trick for using a pinhole is live view, because if you're doing digitally, you will see what the sensor's seeing. The viewfinder is going to be pitch black if it's a DSLR. A mirrorless camera is a little bit more flexible for this. Now, let's give an example. This was taken at Cutty Sark, and sort of there are hints of straight line, sharpish lines. And when you zoom in, now the one thing with this pinhole is time you do get some interesting color shifts of vignetting. But when you get it really close, you can see actually the lines have no edges. The edges are not actually defined. It's that what gives the pinhole that pleasing lack of definition, for want of a better word. There's hints and suggestions there as things are sharp, but in reality, there are no edges. That's at 300%. So how do you use them? Well, there's no aperture ring, it's fixed. Can't control the focusing, it's fixed. So you get huge depth of field at f150, f180. So no focusing issues, apart from having too much focusing. Your exposure is limited by shutter speed and ISO setting. That's all it can be. You can't adjust your triangles, not as sort of got a bit dented. And I generally work in aperture priority. So it will, by varying the ISO setting, and auto ISO is a good way of doing this. Then your camera becomes a point and shoot camera, basically. You'll get some very strange looks with a body cap on your camera taking pictures. But it works quite well. The other thing is manually, you can get a calculator, your phone will do the same job, and you can work on that. But I generally work aperture priority. Early image I took, it's in the bathroom, and I quite like the colour of that. And I made a monochrome of it. Thought, oh, that's quite interesting. Put the monochrome on top of the colour and use the luminosity blending mode. And it yielded an interesting colour palette, which we'll come back to. So what inspired me with Pinhole? Well, there was a celebration of distinctions in 2014 up in Nottingham. I went up with my fellowship panel. I just got my fellowship panel. Paul Mitchell's fellowship panel of Pinhole images was up there as well. I saw them and I was blown away. That's the only word to describe it. Monochrome images taken of sea, sky and land. Medium format pinhole camera, not big printing. Wonderful sense of ambiguity and delicacy. I've got a very powerful impression is that actually you don't need complicated equipment, but it's all about tone, shape, and texture. And that's one of the images he gave me permission to show these. That's one of his images. And another one. And they were fabulous. That was the only word for it. They were absolutely fantastic. So inspired, I thought, let's find out about this. And I get Black and White Photography magazine, and Lee Frost was talking about what we can do, something or other. And he said, oh, if you want to try Pinhole, get in touch with this firm and get a Pinhole body cap. There's a film called pinholesolutions.com. And I did. It cost me 30 quid. And I've had great fun since. So pinhole images in churches and cathedrals work really well. They almost bring out more shadow detail sometimes than an ordinary lens. And my inspiration came from Frederick Evans and Joseph Sudek. Mood, tone, texture, depth. The high ISO doesn't actually, for me, cause much problem because the noise, that's the grain, the noise generated by a high ISO adds texture to the image. Because let's remember, it's not sharp to begin with. And that's Sudek's St. Vitus Cathedral, about 1921. Frederick Evans. These are my inspiration. Beautiful images. First time we went to this Canterbury Cathedral. But the way it can reinterpret the light is quite amazing. Yeah. Arundel Cathedral's wonderful, at the top of a hill, same age as Norwich Cathedral, the Catholic one, about 1880. And well, that's my Frederick Evans inspired image, I think. Now, there's an interesting device Lens Baby came out with called the Obscura, and it had three settings. Its own plate, which creates weird things. Pinhole sleeve created even weirder things. But what I wanted it for, it was a 16, it was a pinhole, and it was a 16 millimeter pinhole lens. Now the widest I've got to be about 24 mm, and I wanted a really wide angle for this. They also made it as an optic to go into their system. It seems to have disappeared off the market. Well, I don't know why. I've had great fun with it. It vignettes like crazy, has colour shifts, so on. But if you know how to handle it, it can produce amazing images. That sort of obscure, that's part of one of the weird effects. But monochrome's quite nice. But Ely Cathedral, now you were with me when I took this one, Stewart, in Lincoln Cathedral. And that's
I did, yeah.
that's a colour image. That's the mono image. I then found some colour from the light bouncing off the stone floor further up, blended the two together. That works quite well. Somebody said, "Oh, that's about that there, those windows there." So, but yeah, that got a second place in the camera club competition. So, there are even some judges out there who can who can understand. This is Wells Cathedral, best cathedral in England, I think. Fantastic place to photograph. Charterhouse. You know, the Obscura, so I do lots of botanical papers like Q. It abstracts beautifully. I tend to print these up somewhere between A4 and A5. And they, on a nice paper like the Hahnemuller photo rag, works beautifully. And you get interesting flare characteristics. This was a plant we had in our garden. I like the fact the lens flare, a very bizarre flare sometimes from a pinhole, matches the shape of the plants. And of course, then I started to realize this flare could be used quite creatively to add an alternative texture to the image. Almost as an infrared feel when you use a pinhole sometimes. These are all handheld. I printed that on the Hahnemuller Photorag metallic paper and it looked rather good. And again, exploring the lens flare to generate texture. Now, this is enough to make most camera club judges run into a corner and whimper. Perhaps we should have more of these pictures in competitions. Works with modern architecture as well, surprisingly. Especially if you can engineer the lens flare. And that's your 60mm Obscura. And it works quite well. That got highly commended in a camera club competition. And just, of course, a wonderful Selfridges building.
David, I have just put a link in for that paper, which, as you quite
Yes.
rightly say, is
Yeah,
currently reduced from £79 to £25 for a box of A3 25 sheets.
that's right. Yeah, that's
Great
it.
saving.
And if you actually look on the look at other suppliers, it's £110 for the same paper.
Wow, fantastic.
It's slightly thin, 188 grams, great for books,
Yep.
but it's beautiful paper. It's an absolute bargain. It's the first art paper I ever used, and it's wonderful. I said the pinhole as obscure. I quite like the pick obscure. It's sort of that looks brilliant on a metallic, the silver metallic paper. And the Spinnaker Tower in Portsmouth. And let's play with a bit of lens flare to give it texture. This is an air museum not far from where I live. Again, I thought the texture was quite interesting on the old Nimrod aircraft. And then Chroma Pier. This was just trying to give a wonderful soft feel to it, a sense of nostalgia. Laid the mono image on top of the color image, luminosity blending mode. Lovely pastel, delicate color. Took quite a few shots on that day of this, and then quite an interesting body of images. But that one, it's not quite sharp. It's a sense of history, sense of past. What's he doing there? What's he thinking about? It's just as a because it's not pin sharp as well. It's a sort of slightly dreamy image. But if you look through the glass, lens flare and so on, it's all chroma. Modern, say, buildings, shadows, light, form. This old glass house, which is now being restored in Great Yarmouth. Down at Dungeness. Mono image, laid on top of the colour image. Has that wonderful sort of otherworldliness to it. Fairfield Church. That makes a lovely little print. The tonality in there is quite delicate. Of course, Whitby. But that first image you put in a camera club competition as a pinhole got third place. It was wet, it was miserable, it was horrible. And I got, that day, for me, steam was grubby, steam was dirty. People may look at nostalgia, but it was messy.
David Book has asked a question.
Yes.
Reference the Pinhole Camera Club competition winning images. Can you remember what categories or themes did you enter the images
Well,
into?
these were open. These were open competitions, but you could quite easily put it into if it's an architectural image or a landscape image, if they have those categories, the images I put that and the other image in were open competitions. And if you're lucky enough to get a judge who likes something a bit different, brilliant. Otherwise, you live with 6 out of 10. And Pinhole, that's taking the garden. Clouds work quite nicely with Pinhole. Great. Stuart still talked about this magazine. I've still got a couple of copies of this from the early 80s. Great magazine. And these images really impressed me at the time. The colour there, which was a dye kit, which you put your monochrome print, you then bleached at the colour and you added and you solarized and so on. And 99% of the time it failed miserably, unless you were really good. But these images impressed me. So I started thinking, well, what will the pinhole do with a camera? And I've go to quite a few old car shows. This Tonnenbaum's about 40 odd miles away, but it's a good show. And I think I love old American cars in particular, and the tonality sometimes fits in with the age of the cars. And then I thought, well, hang on, we want a bit of colour. So put the mono image on top of the colour image, luminosity blending mode. Now, what it tends to do, it tends to blow the highlights, which you're thinking, that's a disaster. Sometimes we can control it up to a point, but then what I did, I printed them on a metallic based paper. And of course, the blown highlights are chrome. And they can look good. That one really works well. Printed up about a bit bigger than A5. Just seems to suit the age of the cars. And it's all about shape again, isn't it? These old American cars and British cars had in the 40s and 50s had some very dramatic shapes. I must go down to see again. Same magazine, just a chap called Saunders Nicholson. He took these wonderful, grainy, moody images. He used a film called Gaff 500. And I can remember it in the 70s. It was a really high-speed film and it was extremely grainy. And I mean extremely grainy. And it gave the most wonderful, gritty feel to the images. So after using the pinhole, I thought, hang on, the pinhole's going to do the same. So canvas hands. Again, it's sort of sharp, but the sea there almost glows, doesn't it? And chroma, in the summer, the sun sets over the sea while you're wearing your thermals and your heavy winter wear. So color image, mono image, put the two together with the blending, luminosity blending mode. Totally different feel, like an old postcard, isn't it? Up at Blakeney, went to the landscape shoot, went with them. They didn't shoot me. Landscape, that's always obscura. So I thought I'd try a bit of split toning in Nick. And it looks quite good. The fact it's rendered the reflection of the clouds works well. And we went to Venice in March. I wanted, I've taken a few pinhole images in the past in Venice and I wasn't really happy. This time I had the obscura, very famous location, and it came up a treat. So I'm going to print that one up because the but so what images work? Simple compositions with strong lighting. Distant scenes look good. Middle distance, I don't know, they don't seem to work too well. Very small aperture, close-up image can be reasonably sharp. You know, higher extra noise or higher ISO settings can sometimes just give that a little bit more interesting feel to it. So what did you do? Well, camera body lens cap. That's how I went about mine. Pinholesolutions.com. They were based in the South Coast. They've now moved to the Midlands. It costs you 30 quid. You send your body cap off and they'll put a very accurately engineered disc onto it, which is about 0.3 of a mil, but you can specify different settings depending what lens you're using. And there's your instant pinhole camera. But you've got to be prepared to be damned. Now, let me explain. I was in conversation with Paul Mitchell, and Paul Mitchell got his fellowship with his film pinhole image panels. And I said, well, I do digital pinhole. Now, I may as well have said, I've just murdered your mother and I'm dancing on a grave at this moment. And I tend to find that people who do analog pinhole get a bit shirty about people who do digital pinhole. Let's phrase it like that. It's cheating. Blah, 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 blah. So you've got to prepare to be damned. Because the analog purists hate you because you're having a much easier life to get these non-digital looking images. And to be fair, looking at an image from a digital pinhole and from an analog pinhole, I can't spot the difference. But still. And of course, the digital purists will hate you equally because you're creating very analog looking images. And are you bothered about it? No. Right, so the Thingify came out, and that sort of looks a bit like a Canon L lens, doesn't it? They did a zoom and a variable aperture one. I had one, and I sold it to somebody. It was interesting, but the lens flare was really weird. Then the fun leader, which isn't really a pinhole, but that can be quite entertaining. A bit of glass in it, fixed focus 18mm lens. Make some nice images though. And eventually I weakened. I did buy myself an analog pinhole camera, but it's a wonderful one. This chroma is 3D printed. The filter holder here is magnetic. And it's brilliant. And at the back, you've got a bit of card you can pull down, a bit of plastic to see if you're how many frames you've taken. It's a 120 roll film camera. What I did do, I had to put some tape over there and there to stop light leakage. But it's got the equivalent of an 18mm wide angle lens. And it's wonderful. What I love is it's the oldest camera principle in the world, made with the newest technology. That's the view you get, but got a viewfinder I'm going to find to put on it. But it yields some quite good images, which look exactly like the pinhole images I took with my digital camera. So where we can use them. Be very brave entering a camera club competition. Definitely judge bait. If you get a good, sensible, sympathetic judge, you can do all right. Print them, make them. They need to be printed. They don't work digitally. You've got to make a print of them. On art paper, lovely. Fabulous wall with a frame and mount. And these images can be successful. Because I actually had an image accepted as finalist in the abstract category in the International Garden Photographer of the Year. And I've never seen another pinhole image in there. And that was taken just down the road. And yeah, there it was. So that wonderful, again, texture and subtlety of tone. And that's a bit of thought. Now, I won't bother with that. I'll ignore that. Right, end of part one. So that's the pinhole and digital bit. The next bit's the really weird world of infrared. So what we're doing on time. 5 past. What do you want to do about the break then? Because the other thing, this will last about 40 minutes.
It's sort of 10 minutes enough, David, do you
That's
think?
fantastic. I'll be here if anybody wants to ask any questions.
Fantastic. So that's brilliant. Thank you. Well, I think that was a really interesting first half, David. I think hopefully people will have had lots of ideas spinning around in their mind, and they'll be zooming onto eBay and Wets and whatever you, and thinking about spending £100 on a fisheye lens.
Well,
Give it a go. Yeah, John's nodding his head. He's probably already ordered a 7.5mm fisheye lens to play with. So that is fantastic. Thank you.
no problems.
So
Right.
yeah, feel welcome to unmute yourself and have a chat during the break. Ask David any questions. It's now 7 minutes past 7. So if we come back,
20 past?
say 20 past 7, that's brilliant. I'm off for coffee. See you in a minute.
I will be too. You're welcome.
Well done, thanks.
Just going to get the next presentation up.
I've just been looking for a Lens Baby Obscura, Dave, on
Yeah.
eBay. Nothing there, but
No.
I've got some interesting material to read through, so I'm going to explore that.
Yeah. The
that sounds
Obscura,
pretty good.
yeah, the Obscura is really intriguing. They came out and I got it. It wasn't cheap. A friend of mine managed to pick one up for a Nikon. They were out for a while and they just disappeared. But the 16mm pinhole is wonderful. It really has real drama. The other features it's got are a little bit weird. But, there's lots of different pinhole options out there. And digital pinhole makes so much sense, especially with a mirrorless camera, because you're seeing what you're taking.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal thing. I mean, I know Paul Mitchell's a little bit fussy about using film with a pinhole, but it's. I mean, I do a lot of analog photography anyway, but I think analog and pinhole is a bit too much.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. It's a lot of hard work because you're guessing. Hang on, let me just kill this presentation. Escape. There. Bear with me a minute. Yeah, sorry, there we are. Yeah, the digital one is so easy to do. It really is simple. But if you want to sample it out, if you've got a spare body cap, pinholesolutions.com, send it off to them. It's about 30 quid. Plonk it on your camera. If you're using a 35mm, if you're using a DSLR, it will correspond to about a 50mm lens.
Right.
If you're using a mirrorless camera, I found it corresponds to somewhere about 24mm because with a mirrorless camera, the distance between the end of the lens and the sensor is a lot shorter.
Yeah.
And I found on my
Well, I
camera
would be using it on a Nikon, a Z6. So
with the Z6, then that would be equivalent to 24, 28mm,
yeah,
which is a
that
good,
would
good.
work.
Now, one thing I found when I did that, I'll say this now, is I originally had a point 0.3 millimeter hole, and I found it was rather soft, even by pinhole standards, because it's a much shorter focal length. It's nearer the sensor, so being short, it made it. I then tried a 0.1, and it was about f400. So you forget that one. And ended up having about a 0.2 of a millimeter hole, and it seemed to work really well. So if you're getting one done, if you want to send a body cap off, ask them to do a 0.2 of a millimeter hole, and you'll find that
Point,
will work quite well.
a 0.2 millimeter.
0.02, 0.02.
O,
Let's
O2.
Yeah,
Okay.
0.02. I found that worked well. The 0.1 was so slow it was silly. The 0.3 was soft, or softer than it should be, if you know what I mean. But the 0.2 seemed to work quite nicely. But they're very quick and so on. You can do it yourself, and they will sell you the disc, about 17, 18 quid, and then you can put it on yourself otherwise. But they're very decent people. It's a great way to start with pinhole photography.
Yeah, it's good fun to me. I mean, I've always found the subject interesting, and a colleague of ours, Vivian Howes, she did basically she did literally pinholes in sweet tins and
Oh yes,
with film. She left them out in the garden for
yeah, a
about
decade.
well, best part of a year, and
Yes,
what she got back were like planets.
yes.
Um,
Oh, you get
it's just
streaks
quite
across the
amazing.
sky because as the sun moves across the sky. That's one of the what people do with pinholes. But in
Yeah,
churches, cathedrals in particular look astounding. There's couple of images actually I was going to put in tonight because I found them. I'd gone up to Birmingham, slightly misty day on Sutton Park with a friend, and I found them, and I'd sort of thought of printing from them, didn't do anything with them. And there was trees, but in about March, it was so there was branches were all sketchy and just they had a lovely feel to them. In fact, I will well, I'm going to find them and put them into this talk. But the trees can look wonderful with it, especially out winter trees. It's
yeah, it's uh, pictorialism really sort of. I've always been in love with pictorialism, and people like Alvin Langdon Coburn and people like that. I just love that sort of soft, ethereal sort of look to their images.
and you'll get that
I've
with a pinhole.
never been able to get it really with with normal lenses. I've tried softening and
Yes.
trying that, but it never really looks quite right. But
No.
I think with that pinhole, it may well do the job.
Yeah. And stick to an aperture priority, stick to an auto ISO, and point and shoot.
Right.
It sounds sort of but it does actually yield some interesting results. And the high ISOs are not critical, especially if you're working on a full frame. And it does add the texture to it. But it's great fun. And the fact is, it doesn't take up much space in your camera bag, does it?
Oh no, and it saves on weight as well because with my dodgy hip, saving on weight is really prime for me.
Yes. Well, this is what's happening. I've realised that weight and bulk is not really desirable. You get to a point, and so it does create a proper pictorialist image in every sense of the word. And so the colour images are interesting, but you say you will find there'll be some colour fringing around the edges, which you can pull back, and there will be vignetting, but that's part and parcel of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, one of the reasons another of the reasons I like what you've shown is I try to achieve those effects using sort of various techniques, you
Mm.
know, and it seems with Pinhole that you're getting those effects naturally.
Yeah,
So
without any
it'll
cost.
save a lot of post-processing as well.
Well, you've got a little bit of work to do with them after you've got them, but the essence of the image is there. You've got to sort of, but yeah, you haven't got. It's not an effect. It's the, in a sense that an effect that's been added. It's the effect of that the lens is generating, which is what it's all about. But pinholes were lovely. So I've been doing it for what, about 7 years now, 7, 8 years, and I think I know about as much of an analog pinhole as most people do, and it's great fun, and it's cheap. The
Oh yeah,
obscure is not, but that's the obscure is. I think obscure is stage two. Stage one is the body cap.
Sounds
yeah. I
like you've
mean,
got an interesting
and
time
when
ahead,
when they're
Mike.
printed, as you say, they look lovely.
Mm.
It they look superb printed. And I was at the RPS Analog Group exhibition a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and there was some pinhole work there. They were spellbinding, absolutely gorgeous.
Ah,
Where was
so
where was that at, Mike? Where was that?
Sorry.
Where was the exhibition? Analog.
I don't know if it's still on actually. You know the Heseltine Gallery in
Okay.
Middleton Cheney?
Yeah, yeah.
Like the Middleton Cheney or one of the Middletons, Cheney or Stoney, but in the Heseltine Gallery.
Excellent.
And yeah, some of the pinhole work there was gorgeous.
Is that in a school, the Hestine Gallery?
It is a school, yeah.
Yeah,
It's I can't think of the name of the school.
yeah.
Um,
I know where you are.
Chenderit School.
Right. Excellent.
but I wouldn't be allowed to be there because I'd go cheated by cheating aids. My, if it didn't say I'd used the digital, would they know?
I
Doesn't
couldn't
matter, does
tell
it?
the difference personally,
I
and
can't.
I've got a very suspicious eye.
I've just put up a screen share of some of the
Yes.
talks that we've got coming up, just for people's interest. I will send everybody a link to that. But just while we're in the break, I wanted to ask you a quick question, David.
Hmm.
One of the things that I noticed with a lot of your images is your composition is very layered. You've got
Oh
interesting
yeah.
things in the foreground,
Yeah.
middle, and rear. Is that sort of something that happens by chance with these wide-angle lenses, these fisheye lenses, or are you actually composing in that way?
Well, there's a strong element with a fisheye lens. You have really, it's not, you can't just stick it on your camera and take a picture. Let's phrase it like as simple as that. You've got to realize it generates a certain sort of image, and it does generate a layered sort of image. So it works in a particular way. So you're trying to work to the strength of the lens, and most of my compositions are layered anyway.
Yep.
But it's a matter of adapting to it. I think I've been fairly successful with pinhole fisheye because my photography style fits the lens. It's not,
Yep.
but so those are people who bought fisheyes and given them up on them in no time because they can't get their head around them. You really got to be disciplined and think about what it can do. But it
So
certainly gives you that depth, doesn't it?
so it's taken that sort of who's the landscape photographer? Joe in the Lake District. Joe
Cornish.
Cornish, well done.
Cornish.
Joe
So,
Cornish. Yes.
so that JCB, the Joe Cornish boulder in the
Yes.
foreground. So don't stand on a hill and just take in the distance landscape. Look
Yeah.
for something in that foreground, like that
Yeah.
tree or that boulder or that stream,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's what you're doing.
the thing with the fisheye is everything's in focus, near as damn it. So you've got to make sure your foreground's got something interesting as well for it to be in focus.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, it's not an easy lens to use, but if you can get your brain around it, it can be so powerful. And so
Absolutely.
if you've got a full frame DSLR, the Sigma 16 and 15 mil is a brilliant lens to use. I use mine with an adapter on my Canon R,
Right, right.
but it's you don't that Sigma lens is just an abomination. It's 1.4 kilograms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's only two stops faster. I don't
So
know, but each to their own.
brilliant.
Yeah,
So
but yeah,
I must say, I love my Samyang on the Z6,
yeah,
16 mil. It's beautiful. I mean, I do a lot of architectural photography and details, and it's beautiful for that. It's
yeah,
such an easy lens to use.
mm,
Even manually focusing. I'm
yeah.
sort of brought up on film camera, so manual focus to me is sort of second nature anyway.
Well,
brilliant.
with the
In some ways,
fisheye,
I prefer it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With a fisheye, focus at 2 meters, stop it down to f8, f11, and that's it.
The ultimate hyperfocal focusing.
Use hyperfocal distance.
Yeah. Excellent. So I think we're ready to
I'm
start
ready.
again, unless anybody's got any other questions at all before we start. Otherwise, are you ready,
No,
David?
I'm just gabbering on. I'll mute myself.
No, thank you. You've made some really interesting points, Mike. So
Okay.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So
Right.
over to you then, David. Thank you.
Right, let me find my presentation, which will be, if I go for desktop, I want, here we are, Adventures with Infrared. Right, slideshow, play from the start. Right, part 2, Adventures with Infrared. So why do I want to use infrared? Well, I like experimenting. You know, I try to keep moving forward, doing different things. I've recently got into iPhone work, phonography, call it what you want. You've got to keep moving and experimenting. And infrared struck me something I always fancied. You know, over a number of years, I was intrigued by what infrared could do. There were the cliche pictures of churches with white trees and black skies and white clouds, but there were some wonderful subtle images which I rather liked. Infrared does vegetation, skies and water differently to anything else. So it's versatile and it's extremely creative. So the delights of COVID kicked in. I had an old Canon M3 APS-C camera, and there's advanced camera services at what now one of the 2 places in this country who do this conversion, and a 720 nanometer infrared filter fitted to it. But I didn't get it back till October, and it was about £300, so it's not cheap. But if you've got an older, good camera body, yeah, it's worth doing. And I had a lot of fun with that. And I had a slightly more modern camera, and I had that converted to 820 nanometers. And I'll explain the difference in a moment. It gives a pure mono image. I passed the M3 down to Joan, and she's also a compact with infrared. So how do we work? Well, you can use film. Ilford and Raleigh and other people make films. Still available. Difficult to use because you've got to really be careful how you load the cassette and light creeping in. And you need to use a filter to block out the visible light. And the common one is the Kodak Raton 72, which actually is at 720 nanometers. It's a very deep red filter. It's got about 9 stops of light. It's nearly a big stopper. You can have a digital camera and put the infrared filter on there. It doesn't always work because the sensor, all digital cameras have a hot filter, they call it, on the front of the sensor, which suppresses infrared and ultraviolet light so it doesn't disturb the exposure, amongst other things. So the exposures can be equally long. You can convert a digital camera in which this infrared blocking filter is removed and it's replaced by a filter to record a suitable infrared frequency. A live view is really a good way of working with this because with live view, you are actually seeing what you're getting. If you do an optical viewfinder, it's nothing like what you're going to take. So if you've got a DSLR, use live view. The other one, which is interesting, is a digital camera with what they call a quartz filter. And this is a neutral filter, clear filter. So it's sensitive to infrared. So basically you then get a series of colored filters which go in front of the camera to give you whatever wavelength of infrared you want. Again, it's slightly longer exposures because of the filters, but not radically. So you've got a number of different infrared sensitivities in one camera body. It's quite popular, that one. So what options are there? Right. Well, we're working actually in what's called a near infrared spectrum. Now, 590 nanometers, this is partly in the visible spectrum. You get a lot of false color images. Mono images can lack a bit of sharpness and clarity. The color images can be quite amazing. I'm not convinced about myself. Some look okay, but it's personal taste, isn't it? 720 nanometers, the most common option. Allows some color in, only a little bit, but makes very decent monochrome images. A lot of people like there, and you can actually do it with channel swapping and get some interesting colour in it. An 820 and 850, which is further on, no visible light, so it's less sensitive light. So it's about a stop and a half slower than 720 nanometer conversion. But you get really good monochrome images, and the processing is a lot simpler as well, in my opinion. So this is, if you look at it, that's the wave, the total spectrum thrown out. We've got visible light, near infrared, short wave red, thermal infrared. And in the visible spectrum, we've got, it goes to red, then near infrared goes beyond it. If you're using the 590 nanometer, it sits about there. So you're picking up yellows, oranges, and reds, and some infrared. If you're using a 720 nanometer, you're getting a little bit of the visible spectrum, but not much. If you use an 820 nanometer, you are working purely in infrared. Now, why do plants reflect so much infrared light? Now, this is the GCSE chemistry explanation. It's perhaps not the true science. I was talking with a friend of mine whose son was very clever at this, and he gave me this huge technical explanation. But basically, plants use visible light, mainly blue and red light, as food to give them energy. Not so much green light. They reflect green light, which is why plant vegetation looks green. They're also not very keen on infrared light. It just doesn't, the plants are not very keen on infrared. So a healthy plant will throw out a lot of infrared. They cannot convert the infrared into usable food, so they just bounce it away. It's the energy they need from there. So that's a simple explanation of why vegetation responds quite positively to infrared. There's a lot more deep science behind it, but we don't need to know that. So what comes out of the camera? Well, if you get your camera converted, they give you a custom white balance is set up to get a reasonable viewing image. And the JPEG camera shows what the camera records. RAW files are open. They can be a strange color and some correction sometimes needed. It is needed. You can use a custom profile, use saturation controls or something similar. Some people get really complicated with this. I know Paul Mitchell does infrared and he just converts them to monochromes, just full stop. But I try to be a little bit different. I use HSL controls, use saturation lightness. I've partly removed the excess color cast with a color saturation slider in Lightroom, then put the image into something like Nick Silver. It seems to work really well. And if you want to make it look a little bit more glamorous, either diffuse glow or glamour glow, because the old infrared, the light bounced off the film base and had a light effect, so you've got this slight glow to the image, and it can look nice. So, but the more infrared, you can explore the lower spectrums. You can get usually exploit false color, channel swapping, all sorts of things. But I like monochrome. I think I'll keep it simple, so I went for the monochrome option. If you want to explore false color, go for the clear quartz option. Then you can have all sorts of fun. But this talk consists of monochrome images because I opted for that. Right, now this is an example of a 720 nanometer image after the camera's got a custom white balance. This is taken at the Vicarage Gardens in Norfolk. And you can see we've got some colour in there. This is what you can use colour swapping, channel swapping with. But for monochrome, I want to get that into black and white. And that's the sort of image you can get out of it. So another image here. This was again a 720 nanometer conversion. I've got to get rid of an awful. If you look at the histogram in the top corner there, you can see it's all over the place. What I try and do, I go for these color sliders and I adjust them until they make roughly the same shape histogram. That's what I do to just try and correct my infrared images. Simple as that. Some purists will say, "Oh, that's a bit simple," but it works, or it seems to work for me, because that's what I get out of it. Right, and now they were 720 nanometer images, and an 820 nanometer image is a much easier beast to work with. You can see the histogram there, but they're all roughly following the same thing. And what I basically do, again, go to saturation slider and take out the purple and a bit of magenta. You can see there what I've done. I've just gone for the purple and magenta, and sometimes the blue needs moving. Just move them across so the histogram's about the right shape, and that's it. Then I may have just sort of levels, but that's the essence. What the only conversion work I'm doing, and it comes up with that. One of the first infrared images I did, field up near where we lived. And they're great fun to be had. Now, a couple of technical issues. There's a term that often crops up in infrared photography called hotspots, and it's where the lens doesn't respond well to infrared light. Funny enough, the faster, more exotic lenses struggle more with infrared than the basic cheaper lenses. The f1.4s struggle more than the f2s, let's put it like that. Some Fuji lenses have issues. The one which works really well with Fuji, I know Paul Mitchell uses it, he's got an 18 to 135 zoom lens, which is not a high order lens, but it works brilliantly with infrared. I've got an 18 to 150 Canon M lens. Again, it's not a cool outstanding lens, but it takes very good photographs, and it works brilliantly with infrared. So the simpler the lens, I get a feeling, the happier it is. A hotspot's a circular white spot in the middle of the image. And you can correct it by using a circular gradient on another blank layer. Less of a problem with less exotic lenses. Look at this website to find out what works and doesn't work. And lens flare can be a problem with converter cameras. It can look really ugly, infrared lens flare. But that, if you want to find if your lenses work well, that's probably the best database for infrared, Kalari Vision. They're the people who make the filters if you want to do a quartz conversion. And somebody's going up with a very clever idea. If Canon have brought out an EF to Canon RF adapter to fit the old EF lenses on, and you can have where you can interchangeable filters, and then enable you to put Kalari filters into there. Worth looking up. Right, Rosary Cemetery, made for infrared. They say it's on a hill. Unusual in Norwich, but Norfolk, but Norwich is in the river valley, and this full of wonderful old trees, overgrown memorials. That's taken normally. That one had diffused low. And this wonderful tree cross, and the wonderful gnarled tree, some really beautiful trees there.
Is there a best time of the year to shoot infrared, David?
Well, in theory, if you're doing vegetation, the best time is about May, when all the vegetation, well, May, June, when the leaves and that are really fresh and full of energy. If you try taking infrared in autumn, the leaves aren't generating anywhere near as much infrared, reflecting as much infrared energy. So early summer, late spring, early summer, that seems to work really well with infrared. But winter can also yield good infrared images as well. But certainly the summer, early summer, and you've got so much energy. The trees are growing, and the leaves are just bursting with energy.
Thank you.
But an interesting thing with infrared is metallic objects generally do not reflect infrared light, so they form really hard comparisons with the vegetation. And again, they saw that shot earlier on. But if I'd taken that with a conventional camera, we'd have lost all that structure against the trees normally. A dull day can be very challenging with infrared because they tend to get a lot of greys in the image, and the greys can really spoil it sometimes. But the beauty is you look at the trees, even if they're in leaf, because it makes the leaves light, the branches stand out so much more. Excuse me. You can create absolutely wonderful abstracts. Looking up with a fisheye lens. Now, I said I said infrared in the summer. Uh, these were taken, I think, in January last year. Well, there was a camera club competition coming up. And I thought, oh, I need to do something. So I went to the Rosary and infrared and see what this area is there. But it's a good, it's a reasonably sunny day, but there's still vegetation there. There's still vegetation to pick up that light. Again, it's that layered effect because that's a very wide angle. But you get say man-made structures against lots of vegetation. Clumber Park. This is Clumber Park. That sort of with a tree trying to go. I can't think of the technical name when the tree goes along a wall. This was inspired by an image by what's his name? Charlie Waite, where the deck chairs were blowing, but with infrared. Now, one weird thing with infrared, you see, if you go up close to a vegetation, I was looking at the texture of this lake. When I took a picture, and I had all these black spots. What the hell they were? They're insects. They're black fly and what have you. Insects do not reflect infrared light. So if you've taken a picture of some vegetation and there are insects in there, they will stand out like a sore thumb. And they said lens flare on infrared can be quite ugly. It's not at all pretty. Clumber Park again, just love the lights. And they've got a wonderful glass house there. Vines. And this is one of my favourite images. I printed this up and I just love the texture in it. You're stripping out the colour with infrared and you generate this beautiful texture. One problem with infrared you get is that you can blow the highlights, even though you don't realise you're blowing highlights because it's how different plants react differently. That's without diffused glow, that's with diffused glow. This image, I'm seeing Ansel Adams' image of something like this, and I thought, oh, that's very, very Ansel. That's on the or the really steep one near in that area, steep walk. But just love the tonality. On a bright day, on a slightly less bright day. This tree was given, this is about May. I said the energy in vegetation in May is quite incredible. We're going for a bike ride along one of the cycle paths up in Derbyshire, and I just love the texture of that field. And then you've got those lovely, intriguing clouds. Those clouds do not look like that when you take them. It's the infrared somehow, when you see it, the infrared extracts it. This was the end of where we were staying. And again, man-made structures against vegetation. But we did have a couple of good skies. Infrared and skies are something quite special. I will show you a little bit more later on. Right, Wisley. Q guys, I've been to Wisley once, but it was very good. We must go again. Now, the thing about infrared gets rid of all the colour to start with. So then you're looking at the structure and shape of the plants. And because the vegetation's gone light, any other elements stand out more. You know, if you were looking at a picture in colour, the leaves and the fern and the palms would have the same colour, so perhaps it would have impact. Strip the colour out, you're now looking at the shape and texture of the vegetation, which I think a small crop helps on this one. And looking through a palm breaks things down to really simple things. And it works well with architecture as well. This is all lavender in front of me, and looking down the path and so on. And the good sun, lots of energy. This was about June-ish, I think. There was some strong, lots of energy in that image, but it's the texture it renders. And in the back of my mind, I'd wanted to get some pictures of an orchard and with the shapes of the trees against and what have you. And couldn't find anything. Went there and there's this lovely old apple orchard at the top end of Wisley. I believe it's been removed now, but the shapes of the trees repeating themselves. Again, you've got the trunks standing out so dark against the vegetation. So what I had in mind, actually, I was pleasantly surprised. Kew Gardens, this in the palm house, and this is a wonderful palm. The light was falling on it. Because you've stripped the colour out, you've got the shape and the texture of it, and it makes an amazing abstract. I will get around to printing at least one of these on the Hahnemuller Photo Rag Metallic, which is, if you want to do metallic paper, it's fabulous paper. So it makes simple things quite abstract. And looking upwards, the man-made structure stands out as hard against this light vegetation. And the complexity of nature is astounding. Especially when you look at the stairs going up in the palm house, which is due in the non-too-distant future to be closed for 5 years while it's being rebuilt. So get there soon if you want to go there, folks. Trees, again, vegetate, leaves, look at the branches stand out. I find that sort of slightly scary looking tree. This is in the temperate house. These are some Australian tree ferns. Their trunks are black. And difficult to photograph these because you have to bend down amongst other things and what have you. And you don't get much hard direct light there. So but it just strips back to shape and tone and texture. And that was how I originally, this wonderful tree fern. I love the way ferns unravel. This was quite a sizable piece of a sizable fern. So that's how I originally took it. That's how I've got it so far. I'm going to use it one day. But the detail and sharpness inside that, where it's unrolling. But you see, if you took that in colour, it would be lost against the green background. These are some images I've been working on. We went there a good sunny day, wide angle lens or fisheye lens in this case. As you can see with the, check, this is at the top of the palm house. And I'm wanting sort of the plants against the structure in the building. And I'm working towards an idea for a portfolio for the International Garden Photographer of the Year using these images. That's looking down again through all the extensions, but I haven't got quite enough images. So I keep going back, wanting it to be sunny so I can get some more shots. I've got the other ones I want to do. And this is looking from the Palm House across to the, which is a very posh, expensive restaurant now. And the infrared for landscapes can be quite dramatic. And the reflections, the way it responds to water is quite amazing. It extracts detail from reflections. You know, looking up the shapes. And you know, I'll just again, you've got some structure there hidden amongst all this foliage, which gives a totally different texture to it. This was a statue, an artwork they had amongst the trees. I did that, which was okay. Joan had fun and games. We had a 720 nanometer conversion on a spare compact camera, which works well, but it does occasionally have a hotspot, and the hotspot's linked to the aperture setting as well. You mustn't go too far down. I find I'm 99% of the time when I'm doing infrared, I'm often using an 18 to 150 zoom lens, or I've got an 11 to 22 millimeter on a Canon M5, pardon me, and I'm using f8, and it doesn't seem to have any issues. But again, you can see how man-made solid structures go compete with the vegetation. That's a simple succulent which was outside the Diana Princess of Wales glass house, and that's done well. That's been a well received print, and again printed on the metallic paper. It does look rather nice. It's all about tone and stripping it away to absolute simplicity. We've got a competition coming up at the Camera Club on Nature's Abstract or something of that effect. I'm very tempted to use that, see what the judge makes of it. Looking to a field of what I call big daisies is a proper name for them. The flowers are interesting. Flowers don't reflect infrared light. They tend to do more UV to attract bees and what have you. So flowers will not stand out against the other vegetation. But if you get a whole load of flowers together, they make an interesting pattern. And if you look into a tree, all the complexity of the branches and leaves. But that image was very well received. That got the best monochrome print in the annual exhibition in 2022. And Stewart, Ian Wilson judged the competition. So,
well done. Well done.
So Ian's not a great fan of infrared, but there it was. But it's quite an amazing image. The print looks quite incredible. But I've started to explore more subtle textures than that now. This is some grasses. I'm working on a more high key approach because you can get some very interesting high key effects with infrared. And they're just grasses at Q, and I just love the shape and pattern of those. We've got, so in the Palm House, cloud skies look interesting. These are just, when the sun sets, it goes through the glass house, the Palm House, and the clouds, just exploring. But it makes the glass almost glow. Houghton Hall, just a bit down the road near King's Lynn. That's on a dull. That's when the sun was in. That's when the sun was out. You can see why we want the sun out, can't you? I'm just trying to use a shadow. Oh, the texture of that is intriguing. I do like that one though. And there we got the conifer hedging. Of course, it reflects light, doesn't it? Infrared light, and the statue doesn't. There was a series of what's his name statues.
Henry Moore.
Not Henry Moore. Who did the
Anthony Gormley.
Oh, Anthony Gormley. Yeah.
Anthony Gormley, that's it. Intriguing exhibition. A figure was set up in the basement, a certain height, and that was a datum height. Then there were a large number of his statues spread around the estate, and they were all at the datum height. So some of them are partly buried, some are on pillars, so they're all the same height. And some of them there was just a bit of a head showing, but the infrared really worked well because sort of it made them stand out against the lighter vegetation. This is a 720 nanometer image as taken. I did a little bit of processing with it and then pushed it a little bit more. You can see it wasn't really that stormy, but infrared can make clouds appear quite dramatic. Looking up some tree, some little a walkway. We've got some trees. Feels a bit scary. Cambridge, there's got a nice lake there. Some lovely tree structures.
David, we've had a series of questions come in on the chat.
Oh yeah, what's that?
I don't know whether you want to sort of.
Yeah, go on. I'm open to any questions. Can see if I can answer them.
Fabulous. Well, Robert just wants reminding. What were the sources for pinhole on a Canon RF body? So that I think we're talking about the pinhole lens.
Then, if the simple thing is, you send the body cap off to pinholesolutions.com.
Yeah.
They will then put in for £30, they will drill a hole in it and put a disc in there, which is quite precise. Now, when the Canon RF, it will be roughly comparable to a 24 to 28 millimeter lens, somewhere in that vicinity. And the normal pinhole size is 0.03 of a mil. I actually ended up with a 0.02 millimeter one. It seemed to give a sharper image. That's the cheapest, simplest way for RF. It's the cheapest, simply way for Nikon ZF as well. If you're using a DSLR body, same principle, but you get a 0.3 of a mil hole.
Fabulous.
That gives you about a 50 mil.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
No problem.
John asks, is a clear quartz filter just a filter you use with a non-converted camera, or is it a spec of a converted camera?
Yeah. What they do, they take the infrared suppression filter off the camera. It's so on your sensor, protecting it is this filter, this piece of glass which suppresses infrared light. This is something you shouldn't really do at home unless you're extremely brave. Mm-hmm. And they physically take that, what was loosely called a hot filter, the infrared suppression filter off, and they put a clear piece of glass in front of it. Hence a quartz glass, it's a quartz conversion. That then makes the sensor sensitive to all wavelengths of infrared. You then, if you want to make it work as a 720 nanometer camera, you then put a suitable filter which responds to that wavelength.
Right.
You want it to have an 820 nanometer response, you put a different filter on. And if you want it to be 590, different one. So the quartz conversion, the clear conversion, allows it to be used with it's sensitive to all infrared light, and it allows all near infrared light. So it allows, by using the filter in front, and those filters will then determine what it responds to.
So it's a converted and then the filters. Thank you.
You need the filters.
Yeah. Booker gives a link to a website, Rob Shear Photography, which is highly rated and mentions that infrared widens the Kelvin range. Mike asks, your HSL adjustment worked really well, David. I wonder if
Yes.
you've experimented with Adobe's DNG profile editor to
Yes.
allow use of the temp-tint sliders.
Yeah, a couple of people I know use that, and it seems it's probably the pure correct way of doing it. But I'm a lazy photographer. I find that sort of by just doing that HSL correction, it seems to work. The images seem to work fine, but
Yep.
there's no disputing that the DNG editor is probably that is the way to do it correctly.
Yeah, got you. Thank you. And then Bob, I have to leave. Liz asks, do you typically use a tripod for your
No,
infrared images? Nope.
no,
No.
because my camera is sensed because I've got this color filter on the sensor. I don't need a dark filter in front. The 820 nanometer loses about 1.5 stops because it's just not responding to the normal light, but it's hand holdable. It's not a problem. I very, very, very rarely use a tripod. You
Yeah.
know,
Yep. Okay.
you need the tripod if you're using like an R72 filter because it's 9 stops.
Yep. Got you. Lovely. Thank you. A few comments saying what a great talk and fab images of Q, etc. Fascinating talk. Robert's struggling to find pinholesolutions.com. Let's just double check. Yeah. Wonder if it needs. They've moved, have they?
They were on the south coast near South Sea, but they've now moved to somewhere in the Midlands, or they were last time I looked.
Right. Well, I think Robert's trying to actually find the URL, so we'll try and search for that for you.
Okay, yeah,
Come back. Yeah, brilliant. So, thank you. That's the question so far, David. So
yeah.
back over to yourself.
Let's
Thank you.
proceed. Right, right. So again, looking for detail. Now, when sometimes because it strips the colour away, you can end with what we call like thin negative, and you can get this wonderful subtle detail in the glass house. And how certain leaves, you can see there, some are much more energetic than others. This is a willow touching water. That's how it ended up. Again, reflection. And the detail in reflection with infrared is quite astounding. And this was how the image was taken. That's how it ended up. And the water was calm. And you can see all the detail in the original subject is replicated quite remarkably accurately in the water. Infrared responds very interestingly to water. Well, Vicarage Gardens, tree fern. It's a 31-acre site. It's full of all sorts of interesting places, shall we say. This wonderful hedging. It's all about texture and light. Again, strong lighting. Symmetry. I use symmetry a lot. But then again, I do also like a bit of asymmetry because that shadow just breaks the image up from being too predictable. Trying to shield it from the sun. This is in a small little building and looking through the window at what's outside, and it almost looks like a little panel all of its own. Each little bit of the window frame, so it's showing something slightly different, isn't it? Even if it gets a bit dull, you can still get some quite good infrared effects. The clouds, quite in particular, come up well. And again, man-made structure, this framework holding vegetation in the place, so you get this contrast. Now, this was the base. Some stage or other, I was looking at doing an Irish fellowship, and it was going to be, and still may happen. I've got many, many, many pictures showing how the vegetation's interacting with the structure there. Got many, many images to shade it down one day. But again, and this wonderful eucalyptus tree, I showed you that one earlier on. This is at its peak, Stewart. And you've got the amazing texture of the vegetation in the water and the sky and the tree. Very rich, very images, absolutely packed with detail. The light was lovely on that day. Greenhouse sort of, it doesn't look like that normally, but the infrared really brought out that vegetation. And you can see there how the plants are overwhelming what's inside. Little clochers. But when you look at them, how they, again, these are images which are lurking in the back of my mind for this Irish Fellowship one day, perhaps. You get a wonderful tonality with infrared. It can look quite special, in terms of in terms of ordinary subject matter. If you go back to that one, the tonality in that I think is lovely. Again, the waterfall, little water feature. Again, going for that high key look with just the texture, stripping up the images are quite thin, although in terms of a negative, if you think of all negatives. And this is they're bringing this back next year. This is a wildflower meadow, and that's cloud. It wasn't quite that dramatic, but it wasn't far off, and we just avoided getting very wet. Looking into one of the water features.
For your information, Pinhole Solutions is out of business.
Oh, really?
Website's no longer active.
Oh, right. Jones been just checking. Pinhole Solutions are out of business, so I'm going to have to do some research, and I'll let you know if I find somebody else.
There's a place in Birmingham.
Right.
Which I'll tell you what it's called.
Right. Anyway, right. So 2021, I put a International Garden Photographer of the Year portfolio together with that image. That one's 6 images. And it was shortlisted, but it wasn't selected as a finalist. So, grrr. Shingle Street, landscape, famous place in Suffolk, which is a shingle bank which constantly moves. And minimalistic landscapes with just texture. Right. That looks the same calculator. Right. First call, of course, first call, yeah. Looking here for Pinhole, if you go to First Call Photo, First Call Photographic Co Limited, they do a lot of analog stuff. They do pinholes. So have a look at them. I'll send you the link if you can find the link, Stuart. First Call.
Yeah.
But again, it's wonderful it's a minimalist, weird place like Shingle Street. And I think the infrared works quite well with it. Some extra bits, Sandringham, with the fisheye, you can tell. And the fisheye again, but sort of tonally, that you wouldn't guess that was infrared. Great Dixter. Again, things have been very overwhelmed by vegetation. This is a Tanker House in Scotland. It was grey and wet when we took this picture, but a 720 nanometer image, you can see the infrared was used also for vegetation. Healthy vegetation will come out light. Unhealthy vegetation will come out dark. And it's been used for surveying crops and the likes. And you can see there, it was and it had been a very dry summer and the grass isn't happy. And when you actually make it into a proper mono image, you can see that bit of grass could be better. But that's one of the reasons people use infrared. old trees that brings out the texture and detail of the barks. Put that in a competition and said, oh, I think it's infrared. The sky should have been more dramatic. I didn't want the sky to be more dramatic. I wanted it to support the building. It was about the building, not the damn sky. What did you just know? I've only been doing it 20 years. Wonderful clouds. And there's some fabulous trees down there. The crop helps. Again, so now reflections. This is a small stream, but the detail you get out of it, reflections with infrared. And that was spring when the tree was fizzing with energy. Architecture are intriguing things as well. This is a piece of sculpture at the Sainsbury's Visual Arts Centre in Norwich. And that one's done very well. Best monochrome print with 2024. We didn't have an exhibition in 2023, so you know. And I've been doing some work on high key. This was subtle, delicate reflections. Now, this was taken the Palm House at Kew. That's the image I got. It was on a dullish day. You were with me when I took this, Vivica, last January. And that's the image I started with. That's the image I've got so far. And that'll make a lovely print. And I think that's a true Yorkshireman print. I don't think much ink's going to get used, is it? It's just using the process to make an abstract. Grasses can be interesting. That was taken about 2 weeks ago. That was taken at Felbrig, not long ago. And again, they've got bags of subtle texture and so on. So on a nice matte paper. Flowers don't always respond well to infrared, but a sunflower, because it's got amazing structure inside it. I love the soft tonality to it. And we can, of course, do harder sort of bits of trees hanging there. But infrared and people don't always work well. This is my granddaughter, Chloe. She's very leaning towards actress status. She loves her theatrical, musical theatre and all the things. And I took a picture of her. Now, infrared with people isn't clever because infrared people, the eyes go black, full stop. By the way, if you wear sunglasses, infrared sees right through them because infrared sunglasses are there to suppress ultraviolet light. The skin goes pale if you've got veins near the surface. I gave her a copy of this, said, well, if ever you want to do an audition for Zombie Apocalypse 14, this will get you in, dear. Finish off with clouds. Sky, clouds are amazing with infrared. It cuts through the haze to start with, and what looks like a simple set of clouds can actually have incredible structure and detail because you're seeing through the clouds, you're seeing clouds behind the clouds. And of course, aeroplanes can make interesting additions to clouds. And what looks like a simple cloud can look sometimes quite apocalyptic, especially if you decide to experiment with processing. Same image. Now, the moon's interesting because when you take a picture with infrared of the sky, the moon stands out. It almost leaps out from the sky. It is very, very weird. I love this image because it looks like the clouds are climbing and grasping the moon, reaching for the moon. And some of the patterns you see, because it cuts through the haze and you see all these little thin strands. And the moon looks literally like it's been stuck in. But it records incredibly good detail of the moon. I do like that one where there's the moon just hiding in the corner. And again, different treatments. And that cloud looks like a face there, or do I need medication? So if you've got an infrared camera and you've not looked upwards, have a look upwards. You'll find some amazing stuff up there. Little experiment. Some cameras have a weaker infrared suppression filter than others, so you can use an R72 filter. The EOS R camera was no good, 9 stops of light. On the Ricos, they've got 2 Ricos I had, I've now got 1. You lose about 7 stops of light. The infrared suppression filter is weaker. 4 stops of stabilizing. I could work f4, ISO 800. If the camera's set in color mode, the JPEG images are deep red in color. The RAW files can be processed. If you set your camera so the JPEG is in monochrome, you can adjust that quite often within a camera. So you can end up with quite a good infrared image without any processing. The only problem is there can be noise and tonality issues. That was the Ricoh. That was a deep filter. Infra R72 filter. That's what you get out the camera in RAW, but that's what you're seeing if you go for mono. That's a mono JPEG, and that's what you get if you process the RAW file by suppressing an awful lot of red on the hue saturation slider. Similarly, the RAW file, the JPEG file, the RAW file processed. That's the JPEG file. That's the RAW file. You're getting more information out of the RAW file. Final thoughts. It's very dramatic graphic images. Try to avoid the cliches. We're all tempted with them. I've tried to really explore what you can achieve with infrared. Strong and light, soft indirect light, they all work. But you've got to understand the process, why certain times it just doesn't do anything. Textures and structures, detailing water reflections. The skies can be incredible. Hot spots. You'll find out some plants also in the image, some plants reflect more infrared than others. So what happens is you see from very bright areas which are burnt out with blown detail, and you can't see that until you process it. If it has a hot spot, you can usually correct it or use a lens that doesn't generate it. But enjoy this world. You're in another world. And it's a good potential to create some really creative images. That's not a bad little book, though. It's awfully pricey. I loaned it to somebody in the camera club and I haven't got the damn thing back yet. So I'll have to unsubtly mention it. I can't remember who I loaned it to. And thank you for watching. So that is that. If I stop share.
That's fantastic, David. Thank you very much. So I think you've given everybody an awful lot to think about and to experiment with and to move forwards with. So fabulous presentation. Thank you. One very quick question, Richard,
Yes.
can you just remind us what camera you converted to infrared yourself?
The original was a Canon M3, which is the APS-C mirrorless cameras they did. The more recent one was a Canon M5, which had the 820 nanometer conversion. These were the mirrorless cameras that Canon made before the R series. But if you've got a spare camera body, it's now probably near 350 quid to get converted. But as the camera body sits just sitting there, it's well worth thinking about. But saying that consider it's an APS-C sensor, the very modest lens, it yields good results.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. So as I say, fabulous talk. Start to this creative season. It's going to be interesting to see what people come up with, having listened to your ideas. So thank you very much, David. That was fabulous. Thank you. And just to remind everybody that next month on the 14th, we've got Vivica who's going to join us to talk to us about her Montana to Route 66 visual journey. That's on the 14th of December. And then the following day, David mentioned Clumber Park. We're actually going to Clumber Park for a Christmas ramble where we can experiment with some of the ideas that David's given us tonight. So thank you very much, everybody. Are there any final questions before we finish the talk tonight, the session for David? No, I think you sound like you've answered everybody's questions. So
I try.
we'll finish on John's comment. Thank you, David. You have refreshed my interest in infrared photography. He's already got his converted camera out of the cupboard. So I think
Fair
that says
enough.
everything. Well done, John. Thank you very much.
Well, so we're not having much joy finding sort of.
The first call give you kits to make them, but they don't actually do them for you.
First call, apparently, we have kits to make them. But I will do some research, and if I find anything,
I can't find it.
I will pass it through to you. You can pass it on to everybody.
I will do, David. Of course, the other thing is if you just put in a search, there's lots and lots of videos showing you how to make your own, which I guess you would simply put a little bit of gaffer tape onto the center of your lens to stop it cracking, and then take a little drill piece and drill a hole. And the ultimate experimentation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's about that. Nobody makes them.
So I'll see if I can hunt somebody down. It's a shame Pinholes Solutions aren't doing it because they did good service and I've enjoyed using them.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. So David from Norfolk, Norwich, thank you very much for zooming in, and thank you everybody else for joining us. Fabulous evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, David.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, David. I'm Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thank you. Yeah, great start to the series. So have a good week, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.
Stuart, could you ping me details of Vivica's talk when you get a moment?
Yes, I will do. Yeah, I will do.
Okey-doke, thanks.
Yeah, no problem
Right,
at all.
good night, everybody. Great talk. Thanks again, David.
Welcome, no problems.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thank you, David. Actually, David, I'll give you a call and we'll just arrange other things shortly, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Cheers then. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.